Dr. Minnis, Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas.
Fellow citizens and residents, good evening. On the 10th of May this year, the people of the Bahamas gave my party and me an overwhelming mandate to govern our beloved country for the next 5 years. We are grateful for the confidence you have placed in us. We accept your mandate with great humility and with a fierce determination to fulfill that mandate to your satisfaction. You will recall that I promised to make an address to the nation twice a year. We have been on the job for less than 3 months. Nevertheless, I thought I should begin now to keep this promise. We are grateful to have been granted the gift of stewardship over our family of islands, which constitute one of the most beautiful places on the planet. Unlike some who feverishly seek power for its own sake, I believe that political leaders are supposed to be servants, not masters. Political leadership is a trust, not an entitlement. For all of our challenges, the Bahamas has many strategic advantages, such as a talented people, our geographic location, our chain of islands, and our political stability and democratic heritage. Bahamian youth showcased their athletic talent last week during the Commonwealth Youth Games held here in the Bahamas. I wish to congratulate our athletes who performed so well at these games, including those who won medals in their respective sport. These young people and their coaches represent the best of who we are. They represent what we should aspire to be in the pursuit of excellence. Approaching our 50th anniversary of independence, we should take stock of our many accomplishments while being honest about our political, economic, and social failures. We have often been too slack and lacking in discipline. We have sometimes lacked discipline in our public finances. We too often turn a blind eye to public corruption. We too often ignore the causes of crime and the criminal elements in our midst. To reset our national course, we need a new era of reform and transformation. We need to transform mindsets and practices which have not served us well. We all agree that God has blessed us with many gifts. As a people, we have always been blessed with an abundance of talent way beyond our relatively small population. This includes the Bahamian diaspora. All of us share the responsibility to protect and conserve our natural environment. We also have a solemn duty to create the economic and social environment in which the talents of the Bahamian people can flourish and in which we can live in peace and prosperity. With your continued support and the help of God, my colleagues and I plan to use the instruments of government and politics to work toward these ends. This is an awesome undertaking, but we are passionate about it. Let me thank the many Bahamians who have wished me and my government well since our election to office. I thank the many people who have personally offered me their support and their prayers among the difficult decisions that will have to be taken in the months and years ahead. Quite a number of people who did not vote for my party have also offered their best wishes. One gentleman put it this way: we are Bahamians first, We need you and your government to succeed so the Bahamas can succeed. I also thank the many fine public officers who work so very hard in the best interests of our country. I salute the men and women of the uniformed branches who protect and serve the country around the clock and who put themselves at risk to secure our homeland. While we have many challenges as a nation, a number of which I will address this evening, let us remember to celebrate what is good in our country. In the last several weeks, we lost a number of fine citizens who contributed so much to the national good. In particular, let us remember the contributions of Dr. Bernard J. Nottage, Cleophas Adderley, and Dr. Baldwin Carey. As noted in the speech from the throne, our administration will continue to rely on the religious community for their guidance and assistance in restoring important traditional values such as faith in God, self-reliance, personal responsibility, social justice, and the common good. Fellow Bahamians, democracy is about dialogue and ongoing conversations about the issues that matter to the people. It is essential that ministers and parliamentarians listened carefully and with humility to the people we represent. Members of my government will hold regular town hall meetings with constituents. I was in Abaco over the weekend listening to the ideas and needs of many of the good people of that island. Tonight, I wish to report and offer feedback on a number of specific matters of concern that I've been asked about since coming to office. A subcommittee of cabinet ministers has been appointed to address the matter of the New Providence landfill, which we pledge to fix as quickly as possible. With reference to the fire at the Rand Memorial Hospital, the government will move quickly to restore the hospital. While the emergency plan appeared to work well, we will give further attention to protocols to be observed in cases of emergency. The Minister of Education advises that school repairs will be completed in time for the new school year. We are committed to ensuring that the atmosphere is conducive for students and teachers ahead of the upcoming school year. We have recruited a number of new teachers and are working to ensure that schools are properly staffed. The government remains committed to national health insurance for all, which must be implemented in an orderly manner. It is essential that critical items are put in place in the ongoing introduction of NHI, including infrastructure, supplies, and staffing, among other items. We are devising an energy policy that includes an ambitious program for solar energy and long-term lowering the cost of electricity, which is essential for economic growth. We are also drafting our legislative agenda based on our election manifesto, including legislation regarding public finances and government accountability and transparency. With the opening of the crawfish season, I have asked the Minister of National Security to ensure that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force is vigilant of the poachers in our waters. The appointment of government boards is now complete. We fully expect board members to execute their duties with professionalism and to adhere to the highest ethical standards. Fellow Bahamians, Tonight, I also wish to outline critical challenges facing our country and a vision and direction for our Bahamas moving forward. As a country, we find ourselves in perilous and uncharted waters. The former administration took the ship of state and set it on a direct course for the iceberg of economic and financial ruin. The fact that we potentially face another downgrade is the result of 5 years of gross mismanagement and incompetence by the former administration. To paraphrase former U.S. President Barack Obama, we did not drive the car into the ditch, but now that the former administration has driven the car into the ditch, it is left to us to try to get it out. It is the obligation of this government to reverse the reckless incompetence of the former administration, which seemed determined to cripple our economy and destroy our way of life through mass corruption and wholesale waste of government revenue, including VAT revenue. It is my government's task to respond vigorously to the economic conditions which confront us. In addition to reducing public expenditure, we must move to aggressively stimulate economic growth. One measure I announced this evening is that all government ministries will have expenditure cut by 10%. There will be no new public sector hiring at this time. We must get our financial house in order. We must reverse the arc of government deficit and debt. We will appoint a special committee to advise on state-owned enterprises with a view of reducing the burden of such enterprises on public finances. There will be no renewal of contracts for emoluments which exceed $100,000 per year. To further reduce expenditure, we will reduce the number of government vehicles. Unlike the former head of government, I will be extraordinarily more vigilant in ensuring that my ministers adhere to their budgets and to financial constraints. I am not going to sugarcoat the medicine that we are going to have to take to restore our fiscal good health. As a doctor, I know only too well that sometimes you need to deploy strong measures to get a patient's fever to break as you seek to alleviate the symptoms and the underlying causes of ill health. The former practice of bypassing the Ministry of Finance and bringing new spending requests directly to Cabinet without review by the Ministry of Finance is over. We are in a new era of financial discipline. The former administration was addicted to luxury travel, often spending extraordinary sums of money on delegations traveling the world at great expense. We will reduce the amount of money spent on foreign travel by government officials. We will implement changes to prevent fiscal mismanagement. There are forensic audits being conducted to recover, where possible, the people's money. We are identifying loopholes so as to avoid repeating corrupt practices. I will not comment specifically on cases concerning alleged bribery and corrupt practices by public officials. But I do note the following. Individuals should be treated equally before the law. If judicial or police officials do not have the requisite paperwork necessary to charge any citizen, regardless of standing in the country, that individual should not be charged until the appropriate time. If all people deserve to be treated equally before the law, I find it disturbing that some people believe that politicians in the Bahamas should be above the law and should not be held accountable for misfeasance or misdeeds while in office. Around the world, politicians are often charged for certain crimes, and when found guilty, they pay the penalty for such crimes. Political leaders next door in the United States of America regularly are charged and found guilty of certain crimes. Bahamian politicians are not so special that we should be exempt from the rule of law. This includes members of my party and my government. Public corruption places a heavy toll on a country. Foreign investors become frustrated or often stay away because of corruption. Millions that can be used for the public good too often end up in private pockets. Public finances are wrecked when there is mass corruption by politicians and public officials. The watchdog group, Transparency International, has reported often on the toll corruption takes on national development, including in developing countries such as ours. It is unfair and unjust for politicians to accumulate considerable wealth from corruption, while the citizens of a country, especially the poor, are left behind. We need a new era of public integrity and reform. This era is upon us. Fellow Bahamians, to promote economic growth, I have appointed a National Economic Advisory Council to advise my administration on specific proposals for economic diversification and economic growth. I recently visited the LJM Maritime Institute, which trains young Bahamians for jobs in the maritime industry. I have been told that there are approximately 5,000 jobs Bahamians can be trained for in the international maritime industry. We will boost support to entities which train Bahamians in the many career paths in the maritime sector. We are also exploring a significant opportunity to diversify our economy in an area in which we have a significant comparative advantage, as we have in tourism and financial services. This project will open up other parts of the Bahamas. We will hear more about this as we finalize matters that are now under discussion. I have appointed an Ease of Doing Business Committee, appointed to make speedy recommendations for reducing red tape for domestic and international investors. In due course, I will announce targeted investment and trade missions to attract international investors who may want to partner with Bahamian investors in areas such as renewable energy, agriculture, aquaculture, and other industries. My government is giving consideration in transforming the Hotel Corporation into a tourism development corporation, which will have as its mission diversification within tourism and the development of more boutique resorts in the Family Islands. I recently toured Bahamas, where I received assurances from the managers of the hotel of a timeline for the mega resort coming fully on stream. This will help to improve fiscal conditions of the country, inclusive of public revenue. I have also visited Atlantis on Paradise Island. It is most important to our economy that both of these mega resorts succeed. My administration will do all that we can to ensure this outcome. We need to get our people back to work and to get our economy on the path to making it again the envy of the region. This will not happen without a successful Bahamas. Their success is the Bahamas' success. We will do all we can to aid them in attaining this success. Fellow Bahamians, we now know that at least 65% of the economic activity and more than 50% of the jobs of the Bahamas are derived from the tourism sector. We also know that only 60% of our hotel and resort rooms are occupied annually. We must focus on tourism initiatives to get our economy going again while not excluding the urgent need for diversification within the tourism sector and in other sectors and potential areas of growth. If we manage to achieve near 80% occupancy in our hotels on a year-round basis, we will increase our economic activity and jobs from tourism by 1/3. This will cause a considerable dent in the unemployment problem facing our country. The government is now involved in negotiations with the owners of the assets of the Grand Lucayan in Grand Bahama and related assets, which may involve the joint ownership of those assets in partnership with a number of investors. We have identified a number of integrated travel and hospitality companies that can bring quality brands to Grand Bahama, but also much needed air transportation. As was done by the United States during the 2008 Great Recession, my government's intent is to resuscitate the Grand Lucayan as rapidly and as sustainably as possible, and thereafter sell its equity to one of the existing partners or other investors. We have no intention of remaining as an owner in the hotel business for any extended period of time. All signs point to the beginning of renovations at the resort within the next month, with the facility ready for business for the winter season. Even as I have spoken at some length on the Grand Lucayan, Atlantis, and Bahamas, my government will also address the needs of the more than 250 smaller and licensed properties in Nassau, Paradise Island, Grand Bahama, and throughout our family islands. Further, we will introduce further incentives to small hotels where local produce is on the menu. A very large number of jobs in the tourism sector are not in the hotels. Many tourism-related jobs are in the supply chain of businesses that serve hotels and visitors, such as shops, stores, trucking, delivery and maintenance companies, and accounting firms that benefit heavily from a growing tourism sector. We will build a native food market for the benefit of Bahamians and visitors alike. This market will provide another linkage between tourism and agriculture. In terms of heritage tourism, the Antiquities, Monuments and Museum Corporation will draw up guidelines for the development of public-private partnerships with respect to public, historical, and heritage sites. This will include, after public consultation, the development of fee structures for the sites. Critical to boosting tourism is increased airlift into the Bahamas from around the world. This is a critical priority of the Ministry of Tourism. The Minister of Tourism and Aviation has already served notice about our desire to make inter-island transportation in the Bahamas far more efficient, far more accessible, and wherever possible, far more affordable. Fellow citizens, approximately $250 million was spent by the last administration in the months leading up to the general election. This was another glaring example of the reckless and massive waste by the former administration, which still today accepts no responsibility for its disastrous governance. They stubbornly refused to change track. In opposition, we warned them that there was dire trouble ahead, but the response was to go full steam toward the iceberg, spending the people's money with wild abandon and few results. One glaring example is the $80 million spent on BAMC. While there is a need for such an institute, there is little value to be seen for the vast sum of money spent. Can you imagine what an infusion of $80 million would have done for the University of the Bahamas? One can imagine the buildings that could have been erected at the university. One can imagine the scholarships that could have been granted. One can imagine the programs that could have been funded. Fellow Bahamians, more than 12 years ago, the World Bank set out to determine what makes some countries wealthier than others. What they discovered was most surprising. When they added up the value of the natural resources such as oil and minerals, all the value of the buildings, the houses and the factories, all the valuable agricultural land, they found that something large was still missing in explaining the difference in wealth between nations. What was missing was obvious, but they did not expect it to be so large. Here was their conclusion. Rich countries are largely rich because of the skills of their populations and the quality of the institutions supporting economic activity. In other words, it is not things that makes countries wealthy, it is the people. The World Bank study was even more specific. There were factors that we can't literally touch that makes much of the difference. These factors include trust among people in a society, an efficient judicial system, clear property rights, the level of education, and an efficient and effective government. My fellow Bahamians, now you will understand more clearly why you will hear me speak about we and us. No government can succeed without the people. No society can progress without all of the people moving collectively in a positive direction. The election is over, but you may now better appreciate why we campaigned under the banner, "It's the people's time." The World Bank study would suggest that we begin with changes aimed at making our government services more efficient and effective. We have a very simple idea. We want civil servants to focus on delivering civil and increasingly efficient services. So all across the public service, we are putting in place opportunities for the general public to comment on the services in various areas of government with a full expectation that members of the public will get better responses. No one is surprised from the World Bank study that an efficient judicial system is a most important feature of wealthy societies. No one is also surprised to find in the study the importance of clear title to land. When we look at the thousands of acres of unused generation property throughout our Commonwealth, you immediately understand the power of clear title. Of course, this is a difficult matter to get resolved, but this does not mean that we must not tackle this complex matter. Better land policy is an extraordinary stimulant for an economy. Then, there is, of course, education. It is the collective skills of the people that determine the rate of growth of wealth. My administration is taking a long overdue approach to examining the best way to improve the skill sets of our people. Rather than guessing what approach delivers the best value, we are examining the skillful and successful people in our society, from surgeons to carpenters, from plumbers to accountants, from teachers to athletes, from chefs to hotel managers, from artists to artisans, from priests to pastors, to permanent secretaries, to see what in their path contributed the most to their success. We believe that we have the capacity to know what works and what does not work. Based on what we learn, we will work with the University of the Bahamas, our educators, trainers, and researchers to develop education reform and better experience-based education. Education and training are at the core of economic reform and national development. Our broad goal is training for transformation. One such initiative will be an ambitious youth entrepreneur program that intends to touch the lives of hundreds of young Bahamians. Fellow citizens, it is now understood and agreed globally that one of the most potentially dangerous forces in the world is poorly guided young men. Such numbers of young men can also serve as a force for extraordinary good. Most of our violent crime problem is caused by young men, many of whom are poorly socialized and who often have little regard for life. Along with good policing and a more efficient judicial system, it is the combination of community guidance and economic, education, and training opportunities that will reduce the scourge of crime. We came to office faced with a known challenge. Too many of our young people are caught up in the vicious cycle of crime and violence. We have already had 80 murders this year. My government is committed to providing the necessary resources to help our young people make better decisions. We must invest in them before they go astray. While we are committed to providing the resources to change the situation, it is important to acknowledge how we got here. In the 1970s and 1980s, drug trafficking was welcomed to the Bahamas by those in power. Leaders elected to govern on behalf of the common good put self-interest first. They became rich doing business with people selling poison. That poison hit our streets. Men and women, young and old, were addicted. Many died strung out on drugs. Those who survived did not live up to their responsibilities as parents. A generation of children was left to grow up on the streets without proper supervision and guidance. Families were destroyed. The notion of hard work that was part of our culture was undermined. People increasingly thought fast money from drugs was the way to make it big. The children who grew up unattended had hard lives. They learned the ways of the streets. They ended up mixed up in a violent drug culture. The crime problem we face today was set in motion by the sins of the past. Leaders chose corruption and fast money over the best interests of our people. We must restore the productive values of Bahamian culture. I intend to lead that fight by ensuring there is honesty in government, that there is fairness in contracting, that public service promotions are based on merit, and that the corrupt are no longer able to use power to protect themselves from the law. I do not accept that any group of Bahamians should have special protection. We are a nation of laws. All Bahamians should follow those laws or face the consequences of transgression. To help transform the prospects and lives of those in gangs or those minded to criminal behavior, my government will introduce a number of ambitious social intervention and training programs, even as we remain tough on crime. Those who are open to being helped will be helped. But those who decide on a life of crime and who seek to do violence will feel the full weight of the law. Fellow citizens, my own political awareness started back in the early 60s. I had not yet become a teenager when I realized that something important was happening in my country. That was when I was one of several youngsters who, on weekends, would go to a house on Wolf Road to collect copies of newspaper called Bahamian Times to sell. I realized then that something special was going on here. There was an air of excitement about the place, and people were anxious to get a copy of the paper. My uncle, Dudley Gilbert, was one of those who, with Sir Arthur Folkes and others, were involved in producing this paper. They were crusading for the betterment of our country and what we came to know as majority rule on January 10th, 1967. That change helped to clear the pathway for young people like me, a poor boy from Baintown, to get an education and to achieve our dreams. So I realized long ago how politics can bring about positive change in a country and for a people. That is what my colleagues and I are now committed to do, bring about positive change in our country for our people. I want to ensure that the Bahamas maintains the dynamism and capacity and provides the resources and guidance for succeeding generations of young people to secure their dreams and aspirations. This is my hope. This is my solemn obligation as Prime Minister for all the people. Let us begin together a new era of reform and transformation as we approach our golden jubilee as a country. I ask for your prayers and support in the months and years ahead. May God bless the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you and good night.